So clean it up.
To get that. And then we will begin. Let me get to my screen. Takes a second to catch up.
Yep.
Moment. See if you can see.
We see the slide, but not this. It's not on slideshow.
Yeah, it's catching up here.
Okay. I'll be patient.
For some reason it's, there we go.
Super.
How's that?
There.
Perfect.
Bingo. Bingo.
Good.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Wendy.
All right.
So why don't we go to the first slide, or the second slide, I guess, actually, right? Here's what we'd like to, these are the things we'd like to cover today. We've done some of the introductions and covered the purpose, really just to provide you with some insight. Hope to have some discussion, because we know that some of you have already begun trying to identify individuals, looked through the conditions, and what we'd like to do is have you share some of that, because you may learn, again, part of this process is about learning from each other and sharing information as we try to validate this process. Kind of do a quick recap about the 2-year process, and can never say it enough, right? And that it is an inclusive process, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. Determining representation on your committees and the committee structures, and that includes memberships. And then we'll have some time for questions as well. As always, we'll, once we get the video rendered appropriately, we'll send you the link so that you can watch this over and over again, hopefully with popcorn and your family. There. So 2-year process. Year 1, we've been pretty clear, it's about self-study. The institutions have been selected. You'll know all of them. You probably know all of them by now, just because by virtue of these sessions. Contracts are going out. Fellow assignments are being determined at the moment. Data, you have some information about your data, and you will be getting more. The virtual launch, we are anticipating sometime after the annual conference. That will provide us with time to get things set up and to have you get connected with your EAA fellow who will help facilitate that with you. The on-campus visit is probably March or April of next year because the first part of this project during the fall is really going to be data gathering and evidence gathering. The spring is devoted to what does all this stuff mean, and how do we identify what initiatives we want to work on for the next year. So by the end of this academic year or through the summer, you'll identify your priorities. Next year is about implementing the plan, and we're validating the process. So any feedback, any and all feedback you want to give us about anything that we're doing here, what works, what doesn't work, we want it. We want to validate the conditions. We're going to go through those a little bit today. And as you read through and work through the conditions throughout this process, jotting down those kinds of things that are missing or need to be reframed, I think is really going to be useful. Overall, our goal, our whole purpose in doing any of this is really to improve the student learning experience.
Bottom line.
Bottom line. Bottom line. Jane, you want to talk about the process? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I suspect you've seen this before, and we've talked about it before, but let me do it one more time. And as you look at this pyramid, I'd like you to think from the bottom up. There are 9 conditions of excellence for academic advising. We are looking to ask our institutions to put together, at the start at least, think about 9 committees, one for each one of those 9 conditions, with appropriate membership on each one, and we'll go over that in particular. I think, having said that, you will find there may be opportunities as we go through the hour today to see that there might be ways to combine some work on some of the committees. So please see this as a frame for which to think about how you will put together what really must be across university, across college, collaborative as you think about the needs of the program. So from each one of these conditions committees, there will be a chair or several chairs who will then form, next up on the pyramid, the steering team. So these will be the folks who will then share among themselves the work of the individual conditions committees, and then share up the line to two folks whom you designate as the primary contacts for the institution. I know Wendy can talk a little bit more about her work at her institution when she was one of the institutional liaisons for another one of the Gardner programs, and how that particular program worked for having that model. So that, in effect, is the pyramid that we'll be working from. And as you see, it's a pyramid that's not built like the pyramids in Giza. It's fluid. They're flexible. They're adaptable to your own particular needs. But we want to see this as conceptually as the way you want to go as we move forward.
The 9 conditions. Go right ahead.
No, that's all right. So, and these are the 9 conditions that you will be looking to put together committees for. And it's not for nothing that each of them appears in a box, and that each one of them is linked to the other in this diagram here. We see them as working interactively. There will be invariably some blending. There will be some cross-fertilization. Once you get started, you'll see, for example, that learning and improvement in the scholarship of advising might have some synergies that you will want to capitalize on, or learning and student purpose and pathways. We want to stress the idea that while there are 9 conditions and each deserves and will have its own look, that there are also opportunities for joining that line to different of those conditions. So what am I missing, Susan? What else can I say?
No, I think you are spot on. There is, as we go through these conditions, folks will actually kind of see the overlap in some of them, which then provides you with some additional information about how to construct those conditions committees. Mm-hmm. So we've now come to the interactive portion of our program, and what we'd like to do is we're going to go through the conditions. The conditions are aspirational standards. Remember that. So these were put together by experts in academic advising, and guided by the literature and all the documents that NACADA has, and it needs to be refined. And that's part of the purpose of having these you folks involved with this entire process. So what we'd like to do is, let me kind of give you some of the highlights for each of the conditions, or I could sit here and do an oral interpretation of all of them, but that might put a number of people to sleep, including myself. Give you some of the highlights, the key elements, and then Jane, do you mind kind of doing what you do best, which is that she's the consummate teacher, and try to have us have some discussion. We also know that there are those of you on this call or on this Zoom that have really been giving some thought, taking some time to reflect on this, and we'd like you to share your insights with others. So let's start with institutional commitment. Essentially, you've now had time to read it, so I'll just tell me if I'm right in my summary, that advising is really a shared responsibility. It's integral to the student experience, and excellent advising programs understand that, and institutions understand that. It's integral to the student experience and to the teaching and learning mission of the institution. There is a mission statement, and that mission statement for academic advising needs to be, or must be, widely shared and widely understood. And that mission statement also needs to inform the organization and the practice. So that's why you have the key elements there of mission, the values and beliefs, and all of this is in support of the student educational experience.
So as you think about what that means for your institution, I'm going to ask questions and they're not rhetorical, so please feel free to jump in. Does your institution have an advising mission statement? Yes or no? Hands up or say yes, no, I don't know. You do? Twaina has one. How about Eau Claire? Do you have an advising mission statement? Right on. Steve, I know you do. I'm hoping if others don't have one, you'll want to get one. And that's one of the issues that we will work with. And this is one of the issues that becomes a university-wide or a college-wide conversation about student issues related to student success and about what those values are that the institution holds close to and holds dear. So with each one of these conditions, there will be questions that you will use to interrogate them. The key points of information that that you will use. So we thought we might begin by talking about some of those key points that we'll be asking for you. These will be representative. They are certainly not all of the key points, but just to get you started, each one of those conditions will begin with something like, to what extent does the institution have an institutional mission statement for academic advising? There may be advising statements that are in different of your units, but not an overarching university one. What does that mean? Will there be opportunities for you to get together with folks from different units who might have different statements based on their own college, their own issues, that you can then use to create an overarching advising mission statement? Do you publicize? To what extent does the institution publicize the admission statement in its messaging? How important does the institution, what kind of value does the institution place on this? And then do you use that mission statement as a living document to help guide practice? So that's where that one is going. And yes, did I hear somebody want to jump in?
Oh,
I was just going to, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just going to add, those of you who were on the data sessions in the last couple of weeks and saw a little bit about the platform, these are the prompts that will be in the platform. So if you think about the electronic platform as a workbook, these will actually be in the platform for you to answer, respond to, make notes about, comments about, and then you'll have, along with those pages, the evidence library, the data tables that'll come from the student information system uploads, the evidence library that you'll put artifacts like your actual mission statement or advising syllabi. It'll also have, when you see items that'll map then to the surveys, the faculty staff survey and the student survey results. So this will all be a part of the conditions committee's workbook that is resident on the EAA platform.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. This just you wait is the message. What you're doing today is it's kind of amorphous right here. You're just getting a brief sample of a larger document that has been prepared for this program that we can't, as you know, for copyright reasons and contract reasons, can't get to you until after the contracts have been returned to us. So stay tuned, but this is where we need to be going. So let me just put this question out here. As you think about those key performance indicators, those 3 bullets here, who at your institution would you put on a committee to help look at institutional mission statements? Who would you put on a committee who would help you think through the teaching and learning mission of the institution, to help you with both the university's mission or the college's mission statement and the academic advising mission statement? Let's talk about this so that it might give others some ideas about where to go. Anytime now.
So I'm thinking in terms of some of the teaching and learning of connecting, we have an associate provost system that is drawn from some faculty who rotate through. And a lot of their work is really supporting kind of pedagogy and supporting some of the work external to the curricular work that the faculty are doing. So I envision that while it wouldn't be the provost, certainly someone from a higher level in academic affairs that has that bird's eye view would be someone that I plan to.
Okay, that's terrific. I think you need that kind of level of support for this. Anybody else? Any thoughts?
I would just add, Steve, you know, you may have the provost come to one or two of your meetings.
Absolutely.
You know, just as a special guest when you're talking specifically about the bigger picture.
Yep.
So in general, one of the questions has been, I don't want to cut anybody else off who has some ideas, but these committees, you want to be inclusive, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but there is no set number of people to be on a condition committee. You want representation, and you want to try to you want broad-based representation. So not only if you hold a meeting, you have more than one person there, but that you have enough individuals representing different areas so that you can have a good conversation. I keep thinking about key questions that you want to ask. I mean, these are the sample, the prompts. Embedded in this is who cares about this? Who cares about this condition? Who ought to care about this condition? And who do you want to care about this condition? So think about that, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the political aspects of this, but go ahead, Jane.
No, I was just going to say, in terms of this one, I would think beyond just advising itself to the very basic teaching and learning mission of the institution. Right. So would that mean then that somebody like a director of a teaching and learning center, or a faculty member or two of the faculty senate, or others who have helped to kind of shape, the academic side of the house? Are there other people on the student services side of the house who would have something to say about this and be able to contribute? And I think the answer is yes. And I mean, it's going to depend on the culture and the nature of your institution, but thinking, as Susan's right, thinking beyond the boundaries of the silos that often are created within institutions is where we're going with this. So,
and let's not forget student involvement.
What?
Committee? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, students. I know we've emphasized that in the past. It's worth emphasizing it over and over again.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
Okay. Learning. Summary: advisors should be knowledgeable about the institution's outcomes, their expected learning outcomes, should be knowledgeable about how teaching occurs or pedagogy and the curriculum. That learning, that there should be learning outcomes for advising. Those should exist, and those outcomes should align with the curricular, the advising mission, and the goals outcomes. Well, the curricular outcomes, the advising mission and goals. So all of these things need to align. And most importantly, these outcomes are systematically assessed and refinements are made. So some of the key elements are student learning, obviously, that advising is a shared responsibility. It affects, everyone is involved with advising. Understanding the institutional role, the academic advisor role, understanding those roles, and other relevant institutional roles, and including the student role.
So the question I would ask here is, do professional advisors, do primary role advisors have a place at the curricular table? Are they sitting in on department meetings where curriculum is designed by the faculty? Are they on review teams for curriculum? Do you have a process at your institution where curricular changes are sent through various channels before they can be approved? Who are the people that would be on those committees that would be helpful? And students here in particular, I think, would be particularly valuable to this effort. So does your institution define student learning outcomes? I think through the accreditation process, you're more or less asked to do this, but define student learning for academic advising, not just student advising for academic programs.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, please
No,
go.
I was just thinking I was putting on my old advising director hat as well as my old assessment hat. And it's really, for me, when we talk about student learning outcomes, it implies that we understand that academic advising is part of the teaching and learning mission of an institution. And then that harkens back to your mission statement. To what extent does your mission statement reflect that academic advising is part of that, is teaching? Mm-hmm. And then you have that defining student learning outcomes outside of that process doesn't make sense. They need to be integrally linked.
So then let me throw that question out to you as you think about who might be appropriate on your campus for learning. Give me some ideas about where your current thinking is. Jump in.
So this is Ben Norris from Frostburg State. We have a couple of ideas that we've been thinking about. We have a faculty member on campus who regularly does workshops with us and helps us understand advising as a teaching process. And so we're hoping to ask that individual. But we also see we've actually have an advising task force that we put together last year, and we have a student member on that task force. And this might be a committee where we ask one of our students to help out with the leadership role.
Perfect. Oh my gosh. Nice.
Yeah. Students are usually very clear about what they want from academic advising and an academic advisor. How about others?
Tell me what your thinking is on these on this committee. I can see crossover, as Susan suggested.
Yep.
Yeah. I think we've shared. We're also undergoing a curriculum review process simultaneously. And so I envision pulling some of the faculty who are talking about the curriculum and where that is going, and having this parallel conversation around how advising fits, because we have advising very much integrated into the curriculum, especially in the first year. So this will be a conversation that's front and center. So timing is quite perfect for us. Yeah. But I envision cross-pollinating and pulling some faculty from who are doing that work as well.
So Steve, you are also we'll be doing the self-study for accreditation, is that correct?
Correct. So we also have teams, it's the perfect storm. We have teams already set up for the different standards of the NEASC accreditation process. And so some of what we'll be doing is pulling from some of the work that they have been doing, and even tapping some of those members from the subcommittees. So I think there's an opportunity for us to map these conditions onto, or those standards onto these conditions, to see if we can build some efficiencies with some of the work already being done.
Right. Thank you. That's what I was thinking of, that it's a real opportunity to see how this process fits in with the self-study process for accreditation.
And for those of you who have first-year experience courses, first-year experience programs more broadly, there's another avenue for involvement that I think would be very fruitful. So yeah, that's something to think about also.
Right.
Anybody else anything on that one, or shall we? I'll tell you what. Let's keep moving on. We've got places to go and people to see. So
people to see. Advisor selection and development. This should take us in a number of different directions. Effective advising programs and institutions have selection processes, professional development, recognition, and reward systems for all advisors, whether those be faculty advisors, primary role, professional advisors, etc. And you need to think about that across all the advising types or advisor types that you have. The position and role requirements are established for academic advising and used consistently and fairly. I know that at times that is often difficult. You'll have an advisor. If you have a decentralized system, you might have one advisor who has one position description because that individual professional advisor, primary role advisor, works in one college as opposed to another college where the position and role requirements might be different. So this challenges us to start thinking systematically about those roles and responsibilities. Professional development is also provided to ensure that all advisors are current in skills, in knowledge, and practices that reflect the core values and the competencies of NACADA and of the institution. Those are kind of the big pieces. Key elements include those hiring practices, advisor development, recognition and reward, and professional advancement. Do you have a career ladder for primary role advisors? And what would that look like even for faculty advisors? There are lots of things to begin to think about here, especially with recognition and reward on a faculty member side in terms of what does that mean in the world of promotion and tenure.
That's right. So many institutions rely on faculty to advise. Very little is done, however, to provide the professional development that our faculty need in order to best help their students. So and Susan's spot on. I mean, what are institutions doing to offer professional development and to recognize outstanding advising competent advising by faculty members? Is there an opportunity for if you're a unionized campus, can you write into the language in the contract that faculty can be rewarded for advising as a teaching process? If that cannot be done, are there other ways to recognize and reward faculty members? And of course it goes for advisors as well. So I think this is one of those rich conditions that we can look at to and take that span across the university to find people who would be appropriate for this condition. So I would like you to throw out some names of positions at your institution you think might be appropriate to put on this committee. What kind of titles, what kind of roles?
At Claflin, all of our faculty members are expected to have advising duties for their performance. However, there is no accountability or no process in place to ensure that faculty are doing a good job and that they are engaging in development, professional development opportunities. So the people that I thought about having on there is the Vice Provost of Academic Affairs at Claflin, as well as the department chairs and faculty members to form the team for this committee.
And taking a selection of those from across the institution, different
Right.
departments, different colleges,
Right.
divisions within the university. I think that's critical. I think, Tony, that's spot on. Let's think about other people that you might want to pull in.
Well, I'd like to dovetail on that. I think in a union environment, also I should say, we administered a survey last year, and one of the top 5 themes was from the faculty were that they are not recognized, and they wanted to know where does it fall in the promotion and tenure process, as you've outlined. So I would love to be able to address that in a systematic fashion. So I'm thinking about, in the union environment, having someone from HR, if you're lucky enough to have someone in sort of a organizational development sort of position, professional development position, to be able to walk that minefield, at the same time couch it in a developmental way, right? Rewarding people for effective advisement. I think that's very important.
How do you know? How do you know it's good and effective advisement?
Mm-hmm.
That's not a rhetorical question. How do you know?
Yeah, we have to set that up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you hear the term hidden productivity with faculty a lot. You know, it takes a lot of time to work with individual students, and where is that evident?
Yeah.
And working with individual students and quality work with students can be two very different things as well. So making that distinction and being able to provide professional development opportunities to faculty and others is critical. Is there anybody else that you might think about to put on a committee like this? I'm just asking.
Sometimes, and these are difficult, sometimes there's faculty mentoring committees, sometimes affiliated with the Teaching and Learning Center. We're trying to get something like that up off the ground. There's an opportunity there, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think part of what we're seeing here, at least I hope you're seeing it, what is striking me about this conversation, which I think is great, is that as you look at these conditions, in addition to identifying folks to be on the committees, as those committees do that work, you're going to have to begin to make some decisions about what you focus on and what you don't. That's the prioritization. So Wendy was commenting earlier that just with mission statement, if you don't have an institutional mission statement for academic advising, maybe that's one of the first things you work on in your action plan. For others, depending upon what is most important to the institution at that time with regard to the student learning experience, that's what you go after. Or that's what you focus on. I don't want to say go after. That's what you focus on. But each institution will be a little different. And we're not going to tell you that you have to have a plan for all 9 for next year. That's just not realistic. You have some priorities to set. So,
and this is a good example. This is a very good example of the student learning experience, this advisor selection and development, because at many institutions, there is no clearly articulated position description for professional advisors. Or it could be that across different divisions, across colleges at major universities, there are wildly varying position descriptions for professional advisors. Well, what does that mean for students? How does that impact students who move between schools within an institution? They can go to, well, I don't want to flog a dead horse, but in fact, there's great value in having some sort of coordination among various units in terms of what students can expect from their advisors. So I think this is another one of those great examples where thinking about the students' experience first, about student success issues first, becomes critical.
And as you mentioned, Jane, the advisor selection is going to really, and student transitions is going to relate directly to student pathways that we're going to talk about. So we're kind of running a little slow here, so we're going to speed it up a little bit. Improvement in scholarship of advising. Oh, Wendy, I think we could just go by that one, don't you? No. Wendy would come over the table. But in general, what this is, that institutions that are committed to effective academic advising are committed to systematic assessment, and the processes used to reflect a recognition, or the processes that are used in that assessment reflect a recognition of the complexity of the educational process. Assessment in this regard is evidence-based. It's not just what we think, it's evidence-based, and that's part of what this whole process is about. And advisors, at the end of the day, are both critical consumers of and contributors to the scholarly literature and the impact that academic advising can have on the student learning experience. And that's a body of knowledge that continues to grow. So key elements: systematic assessment, scholarly inquiry. Wendy, you want to add to that?
That's your baby.
That's your baby.
No, I was just telling the group yesterday that a team of us are doing a content analysis on advising related literature across the last 15 years, and there are at this point in our tub, 702 peer-reviewed articles
Wow.
directly about academic advising. But here's the thing that gives me chills: in 140 different academic journals. These are pedagogical journals. These are higher education journals across the globe. These are English journals in English, and only 2 of them are Nakata Journal and the Mentor.
Right.
The rest are from the disciplines and from lots of different places. And so there is a great body of literature already, and we're pulling it together a lot more systematically.
That's awesome. So evidence here, Jane?
Throw that out there.
Throw it.
Yeah. Steve could probably address this one given his current effort around evidence-based assessment on Wheaton's campus.
This one connects to the one we just talked about too.
It sure does.
Because it's where does it count? Where does it count for faculty?
Where does it count in terms?
Where does a peer-reviewed article count? And does a pre-tenure faculty member dare enter into this kind of scholarship?
Right.
Related to the scholarship, it's a kind of SOTL-ish kind of literature.
Yep. And to what extent does it inform resource allocation as well? Mm-hmm. So, okay. Here's the next one's kind of a duh. It sounds like it's a duh, but it's probably one of the most difficult one to accomplish, I think, because we always talk about communication and collaboration. We know that if academic advising is a shared responsibility and it cuts across the entire campus, we need representation on these committees to be able to demonstrate that it is a campus-wide responsibility. And it does require coordination and collaborative partnerships. These partnerships should promote sharing of communication, sharing of resources, especially in our resource challenged environment, our continuing resource challenge environment. And that what you do here is you actually have a communication plan, and that plan exists, it's reviewed, and it's updated to advance the aspirational standards that you have for academic advising. So it's collaborative, it's well communicated and understood. It's actually your vehicle to communicate your mission so that it is well understood as well.
And I would say cast your net broadly, very broadly on this one. What role might the registrar play on this one, or the bursar? Other units across the institution that don't necessarily have strictly academic function or an academic role. What role do the administrative assistants in your departments play? Are they de facto advisors to some of your students? So think about it in very broadly, beyond maybe what might immediately come to your mind.
Yeah, and technology certainly plays a role in that. In the development of a communication plan as well. So having your IT folks there might not be a bad idea. So, that's my phone. I'm gonna kind of not do that. Okay. Oh, it's gone. Okay.
On this one, I'm also thinking of our admissions colleagues who do a lot of communicating of what we do to the prospective students.
Exactly. Great example.
And also we have part of the way we're structured, our institution as a division for marketing and communication. So, pulling someone in from even that division, I think would be critical.
And think here too about both implicit and explicit messaging.
Right.
One of the things we did for the FOE project was went through all of the websites, and every time, in this case for first year, where freshman or first year was mentioned, what was the language around that piece of communication? And one was, for example, a Q&A for orientation. Is orientation required for first year students? And the answer on the site was yes. And then it moved on to the next question. Okay, so that's explicit. The implicit message is, yes, don't ask us any more about it. So the action plan was, let's explain why it's beneficial to come to orientation. So really digging into the nature of the language that's used across across these kinds of things. Cool.
I think that's really a good point. I was thinking about how this one, the communication strategies, again, is going to be witnessed in the student pathways. I was thinking about an institution I worked with where we were trying to figure out what is the conversation that students have with folks on this campus from the time they actually pre-admit, from admission through graduation. What are the touch points? And part of what we learned was, and experiential learning was very prominent at that particular institution, and we were realizing that we, as in academic advising or as academic advisors, ought to be having conversations with students and communicating what we're saying to the people in experiential learning, so that the conversation is value added. Instead, what we learned was that everybody was having the same conversation with students, so it never quite got beyond the value added piece. So think about that, and think about that with each other. I loved your point, Steve, that what are the messages that we're sending? What are the talking points that help convey our aspirations and our vision for academic advising? So, organization. Next.
And do you have to have 4 different computer screens up to be able to have a conversation? one in Banner, one in your shadow system, one in the advising platform. You know,
That's right.
They don't talk to each other.
Right, and then you have a couple of phone apps on too, so that's good, right? So organization, excellent advising programs are intentionally organized. They must have structured leadership, appropriate resources, a systematic approach to continuous improvement. There's that assessment word again. Essentially, this structure, that the organizational structure needs to support all academic advisors, regardless of title. That harkens back to selection and professional development. We have to make sure that those who serve as academic advisors on our campus, regardless of their title, are accounted for in our support for them. So leadership support, important, resources, and again, a systematic approach to assessment.
Mm-hmm. And of course, one of the areas that we would look to would be what we've been talking about obliquely, if not directly, this past hour, and that is that cross-fertilization on campus. And so the first question I would ask is, do you have at your institution a university-wide or a college-wide advising council? Is it made up of primary role advisors? Is it made up of advising directors, advising administrators? So to what extent does the organization support this kind of organization on campus? And this has a nice blend, it seems to me, with the communications piece, with the one of our other conditions back there.
Yeah.
It has an incredible, this provides an incredible chance to have conversations about the possibility of creating standardized advisor position descriptions for, and so on. So I think this is one of those where you're going to get a lot of membership crossover. That's just my guess, but I'm thinking this would be a prime example of what we were talking about earlier. So enough of that.
So the next two will actually talk about how we are responding to the populations on our campus, the student populations on our campus. And are we intentionally doing that? And are we reflecting upon who we serve and how we serve them? Student purpose and pathways. I mean, the first sentence says it all, that effective academic advising directs students to explore and define their own purpose, goals, and curricular pathways to achieve learning and developmental outcomes. So to what extent are your pathways coherent? Is your curriculum coherent? Does it is it designed to support and enrich the student experience? Are key transitions, we've talked about that earlier, key transitions that students experience, are they reviewed? And to what extent are they seamless? Or do we need to work on that?
And it seems to me one of the other words we need to think about in terms of student purpose and pathways is the co-curricular experience, and what we do as faculty advisors, professional advisors, and the institution itself to support those co-curricular activities as well. So,
right.
Yeah.
Students learn from everybody on campus.
You bet.
I mean, we learn from everyone on campus, and the question is, what do we want them to learn? And how do we ensure that those who are touching their lives and interacting with them are supportive of not only their life goals and their career goals, but supportive of the institutions and the institutional mission. Equity and inclusion, again, it's really about a commitment to the value and the culture of diverse perspectives, ideas, identities. It honors those perspectives, and essentially you develop programs. Academic advising is for all students. And you have to be cognizant in your design of the program, which that then means, and that's the sample evidence question to consider, to what extent do advisors have information about its student population? Or do we have an imagined understanding of what that is? Or as John Gardner used to say, we serve the students we want to serve as opposed to the students we have. Who are the students we have, and how do we serve them appropriately?
And who would be the people on your campus you would think about for this particular condition? I can't offer anything. What do you give me some early thinking on your part about who you might tap to be on a committee like this?
Oh, I'm thinking about two. We have both on the academic and on the student affairs side. We have a director of social justice and community impact, a fairly new area that's really focused on social justice issues and equity and inclusion. But we also have the Marshall Center for Intercultural Learning. So that's on the more academic side. And it's also something that's been a newly created associate provost position to look at this, to look at inclusion and diversity in the curriculum. So
great.
In some ways, I think they've been working together, but I think this would also allow them to think about the work that they do in terms of how it supports advising.
And drilling down from their positions into the institution, is there opportunities for faculty to get involved, students to get involved, and what does that mean?
Absolutely.
That's all Steve.
Yeah, there are some, I think some of the work that the Associate Provost is doing is pulling together some work groups that are tapping invested faculty and staff. We have a faculty and staff of color group as well that works to support the needs of students of color at the campus. So I think there are a variety of different, direct service staff that I think we can also, staff and faculty that we could also tap for.
I wonder if international student services and the work that your campus does with international students, I'm speaking to everybody, would be another place to probe.
Sure.
Okay.
We're also looking at, allies on campus, our allies committee. We're also looking at our committee on sustainability, looking at it from a different lens as well, just throwing it in there, different views.
As we develop the guidebook, the guidebook is developed, we're also adding to it some key or some interesting articles that might help inform each of the conditions as well. I continue to think about Estella Ben-Simmons' work on inclusion, which helped me honestly to reframe my thoughts and to have a little more focus on what this really means. So critically important. Finally, technology-enabled advising. This is the extent to which your advising incorporates technology to complement support and enhance advising practice. To what extent is our advisors included in the selection of the technology that is used? Is training provided for the use of technology? And to what extent is the technology for advising integrated with other technology systems on the campus? Or is it, I still remember my old financial aid days where we had the electronic system, but we also had another external system that didn't talk to it. And even with some of the enterprise-wide implementations of student information systems, not every piece talks to each other, so you have to build those. So,
well, this is a hot button issue on a number of campuses. Let me just say, I know that Susan and I have done a number of consultations on campus, and this is one that I hear almost predictably at every campus. People decide somewhere in some dark room somewhere at midnight with the candles burning what sort of advising technology is appropriate for advisors and for students. But they never tell us, they never involve us in any of the decision making. And then it's installed willy-nilly on campus without consideration to other technology systems on campus. And then we're just expected to use it. And so what happens, I'm thinking of one particular institution where advisors complained that they really do need 3 screens on their desks to be able to have an advising appointment with the student, because none of the systems talk to each other and so on. So this may well be one of those hot button issues that will, and I think you need to think critically about who needs to be involved from your campus on these. So enough of that, but yes.
No, well, I think it only happened at your campus. So no one else is experiencing any of those issues, Jane.
Nobody.
Let's get to a little bit of committee structures. I know we're kind of running out of time here but it was a great discussion, I think. So there are many ways to configure your committees or to address the condition. The big issue is that you address the condition. You might have one committee for each condition. One committee with responsibility for multiple conditions. The notion here is that the model should be respectful of the context and what else is going on your campus, and ensure appropriate institutional representation to address the element. In terms of membership, part of what we were talking about today is getting you to kind of think about, not the usual suspects, if you will, but who else might be involved, who ought to be involved, who do you want to get involved in this process. It needs to be inclusive representation of all stakeholders, and also think about expertise, particularly on that steering committee. Although on the steering committee it's comprised primarily of the liaisons and the conditions committee chairs, that can be bigger. You may have some expertise that you want to tap into on campus. To be part of that steering committee on a regular basis. Maybe it's your IR person, maybe it's others. So you want to keep the tent large. You want to not refuse people if they really want to be involved, right? Because you're trying to be, again, inclusive. Political balance, that's again, who do you choose? You don't want just everybody who agrees with you. You want a nice balance of critical friends, people who hold different perspectives and can contribute to the conversation. There's always that question of, we'd really like to have that person, but our committee's going to get bogged down because that individual is just an obstructionist. You have to think about the players at the table because you want to be effective. Finally, you need to think about your leadership for your conditions committees. Not a bad idea to even have 2 on those conditions, 2 leaders to share the responsibilities. You want people to lead those committees who will get the work done for you and be active participants and reach out for help if they need it. So, Jane, final kinds of comments, other questions that people have? You have 24 seconds.
24 seconds to ask your questions. What are your questions? Hurry. Come on. Anybody?
I want to know.
Anybody? Forrest?
I want to know Ben's. Ben is a daughter, son. What is this?
I have 2 young children who were pestering me early on in the call that something had fallen off of the wall and it needed to be hung back up.
Oh.
and I took care of that.
That's serious.
Good parenting. Good parenting. Good.
I do want to share sort of a last thought that we have definitely thought about at Frostburg State having the 2 or the co-chair model, and in fact trying to have 1 faculty member and 1 staff member as the co-chairs, partially for that political balance issue, so we don't feel like it's equity driven and we don't feel like it's all staff trying to take over the process or administration trying to take over the process. So
yeah, we did that for the Foundations of Excellence at my former institution as well, for that very reason. The beauty of this process is, and it's the role of the fellow to help keep you on track, is that it's evidence-based.
Yeah.
And as you gather evidence, and how do you look at that, at what's in front of you objectively? And so having that balance is really important.
Yeah. And it's also good optics and good politics. I mean, it's just all around, that's a smart way to go.
Yep. Great.
If you don't mind my saying. Anybody else? You all know which direction you're going? You're all happy? You don't need us anymore? What? Come on now.
Don't want us anymore is the issue.
You guys can't go anywhere.
Yeah, we're not going anywhere. So we've been known to crash parties we haven't been invited to. So hey,
watch out! Here we come.
Yeah, right. Well, thank you very much. If Jane is available, Jane's not available for the next week since she's going to China to buy me something silk. And Wendy is always available. So we will continue. We will make this link available to you. So again, you can watch it with your family. Ben, you can watch it with the kids. It'd be awesome. They'll love it.
They'll love it, yeah.
So great. Thank you all for taking the time. It's 6:00 Eastern time. So thank you so much.